got to in this series, because today is number 5 of 5. Thank you for joining and for your time today. So we started out in the first session by giving an overview on the topic of CFOs, leading business intelligence. And then we moved into the more specific aspects over the subsequent sessions. So initially we had Eric McVeigh presenting on business modeling, and then after that we had him presenting on business intelligence tools and dashboards. And then we switched over to Tim's area of expertise, more decision-making last time. It's a logical flow. You've built all these models, you've plugged in the dashboards, so what? You've got to make some decisions from it. And flowing on from that, again, just to show that the logic continues, you've made a bunch of decisions. Oh my God, you've now got to implement them. What does that mean in terms of changing your organization? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce someone most of you know very well, the one and only Tim Wieringa.
Thanks a lot, David. Thanks a lot, David. That's really, I don't know what to say. Yes, but yes, we've been along this journey for now a few sessions, and what is really, I mean, it's almost a little bit sad that this will be the last session. So David, we need to think of new stuff, and maybe all of us in the room here today can think of new topics which we can discuss in 2 weeks, and we just come together again. And I think that might be a good thing to do in any way. So what I want to do today is, if I can get that slide going, is just simply talk quickly about 2 things. I mean, it's change management, but I want to look at change management from a very specific perspective we talked a lot on how we could change what the finance team is doing and how the finance team is doing things. So let's talk a little bit. What is that new finance team and how can we get there and how can we bring us as a finance team in this direction? And then simply then applying some principles of change management. So how do we start that journey then? And I think that's 2 simple topics. And then I don't want to spend too much time. The best thing we always had in these sessions were the panel discussions. And in this context, I also want to quickly introduce Lisa. Lisa already said, this looks like a family, and now who is who in this family? So I want to introduce Lisa here quickly as well. She's working for Macquarie. Yes, basically, and here in Singapore, an old change management fellow, which we shared a lot of things together. And so welcome, Lisa, to this more CFO finance-driven community. Where we maybe can do then some sort of introduction then later as well.
Sure. Hi everybody, and hi to the family.
Let's start as usual. Let's start with a question. Let's start with a poll to get everybody a little bit warmed up for this session. Today we have quite a long text, so I'm just gonna read through it, and while I'm reading through it, you might be making up your mind, and it's a bit tricky because all of these options might be one of the things which you're experiencing, but you have to choose one. You're only allowed to choose one. So in your experience, which of the following best describes how companies approach project adoption and change management? So either you have external change management, and external change management experts that are brought in at an early stage for your significant change projects. Or you say, okay, we focus more on internal career paths that include change management capabilities and are readily available. So we look at more from an internal perspective. Or it might happen that the finance function is left to handle the change themselves and the CFO is filling that role as a change manager. Or then the last option is, as a finance team, we don't commit to too many projects, and this helps us actually to increase our success. So we're not doing too many things at the same time, so we can easily handle these initiatives. So let us know what you think, where you are. So I'm on my side. I'm seeing the votes coming in, so I just let it go a little bit longer, and then see where we go. So we have the majority so far on external change management experts, but let's see. I can show it to you as well. So let's see where the votes are coming in. But then also there's a number of people who think, okay, that the votes are switching. Me as a CFO, I'm left alone by doing it myself. So let's make sure that you get the right capabilities and the right skills as well. So let's see if you get some more votes in. So what is your experience which describes how your company approaches project adoption and change management? I think that was pretty nice. So we see that so internal change capabilities might not be so readily available, and I think nobody has the feeling that, oh, we can focus just on one project at a time, so we can make that one project successful. So it really seems that you need to be juggling a lot of different projects. And yeah, it looks like that most of the time the CFO needs to just handle the change by themselves. So let's see how we can help you guys. So David nicely introduced myself already. So I'm a change management practitioner at Hive 7 team here based in Singapore. And but let's go and look at these two topics. First is the new finance team. So what is that new finance team? We in the previous session, we talked a little bit about that collaboration success. We realized, okay, it's not the finance team who needs to do everything. It's actually the finance team and the business representatives. We need to collaborate together in order to be successful together. That means clarity. It means we need to jointly design our reports and the outcomes. We need to have ownership, who is doing what, but then also that tendency, and then there was also something we looked at in decision making again. How can we bring these things further down to the front lines? And that's a little bit some ideas how we can make collaboration more successful. We also talked, and that's again in that context of how we can make lasting business success with the business team, with the finance team working together. And I think there was some notion in one of the some of the session where we say the finance team is actually nicely positioned in that whole environment as an objective facilitator. Let's say if business intelligence is owned by marketing, as an example, and it clearly might have a bias towards more a marketing focus and marketing scope. So taking it back to finance will give it some sort of objectivity, and the finance team can almost act as a facilitator in that aspect in order to drive business intelligence and to drive then the decision-making process. We also talked about some of the pain points. There are just so many last-minute requests. There's just so much work coming on, and I'm not surprised in the poll before where we say, actually, yeah, we're not able to reduce the number of projects we're handling concurrently. We just need to deal with them all at the same time. So it's just that huge workload coming in, either as last-minute requests, as this planning and analysis cycle, which come up and come and go all the time. I mean, I guess I'm surprised that so many of you still have time to come today, because I know many companies are deeply in budgeting phase. But maybe based on what we have discussed in the previous session, you already delegated a lot of things to the business. So you as a finance person have more time for that. But instead, we also discussed that these finance planning and analysis routines don't really have meaning. And that's a little bit, these are some of the pain points. We said, okay, we should maybe approach the way we are looking at us, what are we doing as a finance team in different ways. So that's a little bit where you say, okay, what is now that collective dream? And it's a little bit like, I realized that I was adding things to this slide, and then in the end I realized that slide is a little bit busy. But let me walk you through the elements of this slide. So what we want to achieve is that, I like to call it a collective dream of a finance team. It could be a vision, it could be a strategy which we want to do. It's just that North Star of how does that look like? What does it feel like us being the finance team? What does that mean for us? What is that new finance team? and how we derive that. And I came across that German word Leitbild, which is the imagination of a future state, which is guiding us. So that's light means guiding, and build means imagination. So that's it. I like that word because it gives us a lot of tangibility. Like, it's very tangible on what it is that we want to strive for. So what does it need actually to that we can reach that light build, that imagination of the future state? So one of the elements is that what is actually important to us? What are our values? What do we feel we can achieve and want to achieve? So it's first that self-reflection. What do we want? And then also the next step is then looking, who are our customers? And I think as a finance team, the different business people, maybe external finance organizations, there might be a few customers which we have as a finance team. And then the big question is, how can we create value for them? And then combining this, what do we want to achieve? What is our own value? What are our values? What are our strengths? What is the value we can deliver to our customers? This together will then be, with this together, we then be able to create our collective dream of the finance team. So the big question here is who is defining these elements? And that's a little bit where I, as a change manager, have a specific thought around that as well. And maybe in the panel we can discuss this question as well. Who should be defining that collective dream of the finance team? Is that the CFO? Is that the ExCo? Is that the board members? Who is doing that? Are these the people at the front? Is that the finance team itself? Is that in collaboration with the customers around? So that's a little bit the question. And I mean, I think it was about a year ago, somebody asked me the question, and how can we get rid of resistance? And for me, the answer to get rid of resistance, and now that's in the context of also then what is the dream of the finance team, is actually allowing the people to define their own change. And in this context, I think it's important to understand, if we want that the finance team is excited actually about that new way we are defining ourselves, that new finance team, then the finance team itself should actually define it, and with the help of the people around. So and in that sense, if the big question is who is it that defines these elements, then I think it's the people who are actually involved in that. And that's, I think we need to be clear as a CFO. It's not all on your shoulders that you are now coming up with that dream of the new finance team. You can go to your team and ask these questions. So how are you going to do that? What are the steps to translate that vision into action? And that's really one of the things which I see is important in many different contexts. We have a vision. We often observe that it's very difficult to put this on the floor, on the ground, on the table, that things are actually moving in a different way. So what I mentioned before already is, what are our team values? What are the team values? What is important to us? What are our strengths? So we start with this. We start with that self-reflection. And out of that, we're trying to define, together with the value we want to create for our customer, what is the meaningful purpose? We define it as purpose statements on what is it, what we want to, what is our light bill? What is it, our North Star? How does it actually look like? Where do you want to go? And this gives us input to tangible objectives which we want to focus on right now. These objectives are not necessarily something which you want to achieve in a certain timeline, but it's an objective that we say we want to enable the business to make decisions which are solid and quick, or solid and fast, for example. Quick, not quick and dirty, but I mean that they are available. The decisions are available at the time when we need to make these decisions. So that might be an objective. So objective for me is always a little bit, doesn't have a time element in itself, but it's a very easily taken out of that meaningful purpose. When we have these objectives, we then start to think about, okay, what can we achieve? What is the key result which we want to achieve in the next 3 months? And that makes it then starting to make it tangible. So when we say, okay, we want to enable the business to make smarter and solid and fast decisions, what is it which we need to in place? We could say, okay, let's start to identify the key decisions and define a decision charter for all of these decisions. That could be a key result which we can achieve in the next 3 months. And that starts to make it more tangible, and then people make it know what to do, what to change in their daily business. And maybe some of the people have realized that there are on purpose the words objective and the words key results. So objective and key results is actually quite in some areas, in some functions, in some industries, a quite known way how to translate or how to define what we're going to focus on in the next month. So these are, if you're familiar with OKRs, these tangible objectives and the key results for the quarter are meant to be these OKRs. One element which is important coming out of that in the next step is as well that we're defining work principles. How are we going to achieve that? A little bit the sidelines, which are guiding us to do it in a way where we as a team feel comfortable to do it. And that might be anything which is coming up. There's many examples, but I think the importance is here that it comes out of the team and that the team is defining their own work principles together with everybody in the team. So these are 5 steps. The values together with the what we can achieve for the value we can achieve for the customer, the meaningful purpose, which then clarifies what are the tangible objectives, what are the short-term key results, and then surrounded by work principles. I deliberately designed it as a circle, but it doesn't mean but that would be very busy if I describe it. It's more like these are individual circles. So the team, let's make it as the team values you might reflect every 1 or 2 years. The meaningful purpose might be something what you put on the table to see if it needs change on a yearly basis as well. The objectives, you say, okay, they are set, but let's every quarter have a look on, do we need to adopt that? The key results will change every quarter. So you see there's a cycle for each of these 5 elements which are reviewed on a regular basis, and the cycle is getting faster and faster and faster, whereas the work principles, in my eyes, you should review or you should let them evolve every 3 to 4 weeks. So every 3 to 4 weeks, the team should have a discussion. Do we need to add something, adjust something, remove something from the work principles that they still work for us? And especially in an environment like we experienced in the last 18 months, that there's always something new coming up where we need to adjust because things have evolved in a way that we don't feel comfortable anymore. We need to change that. So that's important that this is a circle in itself, but it's also each item in itself needs a certain reflection and review frequency. Let's put it like this. So this is a little bit, I'm not sure, and actually it's on purpose. I'm not telling you what is that new finance team, what is that dream of the new finance team, but I want to give you a little bit tools at hand and an imagination how that could work, how you could define that for your finance team, how you could define it, how that looks like by yourself. And I think that's the importance. And as I said in the beginning, if somebody comes from outside and tells you this is what the new finance team looks like, as a natural reaction, and it's not even almost certainly, but it's as a natural reaction, people will resist to it. So it's important that we are identifying that new finance team from within and continuously evolve it. That's what I wanted to show with this slide. So this has been some thoughts around that new finance team. So the first topic. The second topic is then, how are we going to start that, right? I mean, wow. That now I know how to do it, but where am I going to start? And in change, I always feel it's the first step is the most important one, that we actually going to start it. And I see sometimes projects which are discussing and discussing and discussing, yes, what we could do, but is it feasible, and all these elements which are actually preventing us from actually getting started. I mean, getting started means we actually doing something and not talking about it. And people who know me, I like to be philosophical at times, and I like to bringing academic results and so on. But at the same time, I'm a very practical person. I want actually that change is happening and change is done. So for me, then, what is important to that is that first step. How do we start that journey? From my perspective, I like to just quickly make maybe a little bit of turnaround these leadership qualities. So in my experience, from where I see, there are certain leadership qualities which are important in order to create an environment where people can change, where we can change, where we can be successful in this complex situation. I mean, it's a complex situation. So I like that from the poll, because nobody took, oh yeah, we can focus on one project at a time and that we can make sure it's successful. It's just not possible. It's so complex. It's so fast paced but that also means there's certain leadership qualities which have been shown that they are important for the success, that we are successful in this environment. And I just on the right hand side, I put some of the key questions which are concerning a lot of people right now, that talent scarcity, that lack of innovation. Like I talk to companies as well. We tried so many things to be innovative. It didn't work. What do you suggest? Because I'm trying. Innovation for me is a key ingredient to change, or change is a key ingredient to innovation. Sometimes it doesn't really matter in which way you put it, but they're very closely linked. If when we innovate, we change, and we need change in order to innovate. But also that there's a certain inertia in people which we observe, and which is slowing down productivity. How can we address that? What is it there? And then the question as well is, we talk a lot about new leadership skills. How can we make sure that we actually adopt these leadership skills? And I see that many people have intellectually understood what they require to do, but it hasn't become their second nature. And when you observe these leaders, and for me, leaders, I mean, that's why it's also important. Leaders is not just the CEO and the people reporting to the CEO. Leaders it's almost any person which has an influence in the company. And that could be any person. And in the end, like, any person should become a leader. And I think that's a little bit where I see where I see with leaders and leadership qualities. So then that's the question, when we talk about these leadership skills, these people skills, who is responsible to adopt them? And I think these are then the questions which I want to put here in this environment, just as a starting point on where we get started. And thank you for bearing with me, because I will go down and give some hints and tips where you can start. But I want to put that a little bit in a framework. So what are these leadership qualities? And at Hive 17, we actually use this model of leadership qualities also for assessments to see, are we going in the right direction with our leadership skills within the organization? So there's 4 elements which it's something which evolved over years at Hive 17. We've really been working on that, and then some of you might know some earlier versions. So so it keeps being polished, but the main 4 elements have been there for quite some time. So there's 4 elements which I've seen which are really helping to be successful, and 2 of them we already talked about. We talked about the light build, that imagination which is guiding us to a future state. So this is important, that people know, or in which direction are we going. I mean, imagine if there's a green field and people are gathered around in that green field, and everybody just wanders off in a different direction. And that happens in companies. It very often happens in companies, especially when we look at how KPIs and goals are defined for the different departments within a company, and then you look at that from a from a little bit of a distance, and you see that makes people walking in different directions. So it's important to then come back and say, okay, this is where we want to go together. This is the rough direction. It doesn't need, and I like it that it's an imagination. It's not planned in detail. It's just an imagination, but it helps us to go roughly in the same direction. And with that customer value is important. And maybe we talked about it as a finance team. Who are our customers? How can we create value for them? One of the elements is there that we can, I mean, it's one of the elements. I don't say it's all of the elements, but it's one of the elements we talked about in this workshop series is help the business to make better decisions, help the business to get more clarity on where we are as a business with the dashboards and so on, and so on. So that's the value they can generate by identifying who are our customers and then asking them how we can create value for them. So that and then I want to go a little bit more into experimentation, and this is really that. That's also that first step, which I mean, what can we, where can we start? And for me, experimentation is a lot about trial and learning. It's that we want to take a step forward. We do have certain assumptions because that's the reason why we're taking the step in that certain direction. And the purpose of these steps are to understand more, to learn more, to get a bit more clarity and receive feedback. Are we going in the right direction? So for the experimentation means we're going in small steps forward, and each of these steps should be a learning opportunity, should be, and I like that in some people say that learning should be first. And I recently, although it's now longer ago, read that book from David Marquette, Turn the Ship Around, and he's a captain of a US Navy submarine, and he puts learning first. He wrote a creed for the submarine, and the first item on that creed is we want to learn. And that's quite amazing. He basically turned a submarine into a leadership development campus. I mean, if you ask me, and that's why I think experiment, and you only get there by experimentation, and that's the importance of experimentation. That's also why I say, okay, when we look at our new finance team, the vision of that, or when we look at our key results, when we look at our working principles, we'll have a first draft and see how it works. If it doesn't work how we expect it, then we adopt it and change it and do a next step and next step and next step. And so this is what is experimentation, is that I like to call it trial and learning. Quickly going out with something and getting feedback. And it's also, when we look at other elements, it's this prototyping where we say, okay, when we talk about dashboards, for example, let's get something very lo-fi, some scribbles of a piece of paper, and ask the business, does that look like, does it help you when we do it like this? And then getting the feedback and then improving the fidelity of this prototype with each step we're going ahead. So this was experimentation. So the next element. So we have the light bill, we have the customer value, and this is giving us a little bit direction where we want to go. And experimentation is the path to get there. And for me, then the fourth element, relationship, is really the underlying foundation of everything. And the way I like to put it sometimes is that if you go to somebody when you have an issue, and you always talk to that person only when you have an issue, how likely is that person, or how positive is that person to help you? Or in another scenario, if you have a regular lunch with that person, you are curious about what that person is doing, you share your successes, so you build some sort of a relationship, and then suddenly you have an issue and you ask the person, hey, can you help me? The likelihood that this person is helping you will be much higher because you already have an ongoing relationship. There is a communication channel existing, so you don't need to build that communication channel when you have an issue. So that's for me is one way to put why a relationship is so important. So relationship is for me that environment we want to create, which allows us to have open and transparent conversation. It's also strongly related to psychological safety, to that health and healthy work environment, which many people talk about these days. And it starts with ourselves. We need to think about the relationship we have ourselves. Then is how we can help our team, and then how we can help the people beyond that. And I think that's a little bit what relationship is about. It's important here to know that it starts with ourselves. So, and in that note as well, how do I imagine the future state of the finance team? And then discuss my imagination with the other team members, while being open and curious what the other team members think about that vision, and then come to something together with experimentation. So these are these 4 leadership qualities I mentioned, which can give us then a hint on what does it now mean to actually get started. And this is now just something based on the conversations we had in the last four sessions, which I say, okay, what can we do? And then let's start with light build again and say, just put your finance team together and say, okay, looking at these different elements which are working well and which are frustrating us, how would we imagine that finance team? How would that dream of a finance team look like? That would be something to start to just have that first initial conversation. For customer value, we could, but then anything goes. We could say, okay, let's take one of the major decisions and make a decision making charter, and discuss that with the business and see how we can use that as an example of how we can generate business for value for the business people around us. Experimentation is then selecting one activity which leading us to that customer value, and continuously improve, and having that mindset of learning in there as well. So that's that selecting one activity, and that's then starting with experimentation, knowing that it will take a long time. It is a journey to go to that perfect state of the finance team, but it always starts with one step. And that first step is then leading to the next step and leading to the next step. Basically also, like, instead of looking at the big mountain we want to climb, we just look at the first few flights, and then walk up the first few flights, and then see where we got, and then go further and go take the next few flights. And then suddenly we are on the top of the mountain. And with relationship is when we engage in these activities, maybe set together a small 3, 4, 5 people from finance team, from different business segments, that you form a small cross-functional team that is actually going along the way. So these are how these first steps could look like, based on the leadership qualities which are here to make teams successful in an environment which is complex and ever changing, and then how can we speed fast in this environment. So that's a little bit how that future state could look like. It's not running very fast, but it's walking in a pace where we can walk for a longer period of time, and I think I like that. I like green. I like sunshine. I like that. I think it gives us a warm and positive way. And this is a little bit how the journey could look like. So we need to have a vision to get there, and it's then starting with small steps and see where the journey is leading us. So this has been a little bit of an introduction, change management introduction, on what is that new finance team and how can we start to go in that direction we want to go. But I think it's we want to look at the panel discussion and see what that means in practice. I mean, hearing from different experts with different experiences, I think that's normally where we can learn the most. So, Michael, handing over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. Always exciting to listen to you. Thank you. I always learn a lot in these sessions. I wish it would never end. So, I think I would like to pick up the topic that you said at the very end, because that is really where it starts, in my opinion, about a vision. If you want to introduce change in a finance department, you actually have to come up with a vision for a finance department. And personally, I always found this really challenging. I guess in finance, we are not generally the most creative or future-oriented people because we go from 1 month and closing to the next. The only glimpse into the future we have is our budget, but then we're so busy. So how do we get to come up with a vision for this department? So maybe I could throw that question at Lisa, because you have quite a broad experience, what I saw from your work experience in Macquarie. So do you have any views how we can do that, how we can approach this?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Look, I think that is it's a challenge I think that everyone faces, regardless if you're in a finance team versus a banking team versus a marketing team. Everyone is currently so focused on what they do today, it's difficult for them to look to the future. Some tips that I've seen work really well is actually making sure as a leadership team you're investing in prioritizing your vision and what you need to look like over your current day-to-day. So you talk about your finance cycle. So what that means is if you're committed to this change, you need to free up the space for people to think about this. So that's my number one sort of key tactic is free people up, free some space up to think. And you mentioned, finance teams aren't used to being creatively thinking. And look, and I think most people, no one really has the luxury today of time. Everyone's so focused on achieving what they need to achieve, achieving their KPIs. So some other tactics that I've seen work is, again, investing the time, but also looking to two things, looking to what others are doing. So really have that mind, that curiosity, and understanding what your competitors are doing in this space. What is best practice? If you could ask your leadership team, forget best practice in your own patch, what is best practice out there in the real world or with your competitors who you think are doing well? That would be another tactic that I would employ. And the other tactic that I find hugely helpful are where are your pain points, and a meaningful change or an innovative change solves people's problems. So solves people's pain points and makes a difference. So your best people to answer where you should be heading are your customers. So having really robust discussions with them in terms of what are your pain points, where is our rework coming, where are your frustrations? And that can give you a bit of a North Star.
Yeah, excellent point. I like the connection with the customers for the finance department, also to get into that understanding that yes, we have a lot of customers within our organization that we can serve. Shin, that is kind of picking up a discussion thread that we started on one of the previous panel discussions. How do you get people in your department in finance and accounting to get a customer-centric approach? Is there anything that you have experimented with or that you found particularly successful to do that next step that Lisa now mentioned, where, okay, how do we come up with a vision? And so one good tactic would be to speak to the customers. So how do we connect to our customers, our internal customers within the company, to other business units?
Well, I actually think that the company needs to also provide a conducive environment for us to do that. So I think in some of the changes that the transformation projects that I had driven before, I think it was quite important that right from the top, it could be it's a business head, the CEO of the business, who also partners with the finance team to drive this transformation in the organization. So when we have the support or the sponsorship of the business as well, and that is when I think we are able to drive better better success in our transformation projects, because then the business will actually help and work with us in driving the changes, right? And of course, we need to have conversations with them. So what I had done before was we started having roadshows to kind of, have conversations with the business to understand, as what Lisa had mentioned earlier, what are their pain points right now, and what we can do to help them, and by helping them, they're also helping us, right? I think that is the kind of conversations we need to start so that we can have that that agreed consensus in the business as well to help drive transformation and changes. Yeah. So I actually think that, having the support of the head of business is important.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. If that has to be also driven from the top, there must be an interest from management in doing this to support everyone in their journey. Because initially it might not be so comfortable to go out to the business and see what are the pain points, because it could potentially disrupt how you do your own work that you have been so used to. So I think you kind of need to be ready to jump into that. Maybe that is something for Tim, because that, I think, goes into the direction of agile thinking and being flexible in how we do things. How can we help our people in finance to adopt that kind of thinking, that kind of mindset, that I'm less scared of changing the ways how I do things?
Yeah, and I mean, I've been working with Agile for I think three years roughly around it, and I've been applying Agile in manufacturing environments, for example. So I don't have that. I mean, I in the meantime I do have, but I didn't start with the typical Agile in IT departments, for example. So I really started to do with that in environments which are very far from a traditional area where you apply Agile. The thing which came out for me is what are some of the key principles of agility and how does that actually help you? And the three principles are, and it also resonated with what Lisa said as well, we actually need to have some sort of a clarity in which direction we want to go and what is it, where we actually add customer value. So that's one of the big things in Agile, is that focus on customer value. The second big thing in Agile or in agility, I prefer to sometimes say agility than Agile, because a lot of people do Agile but are not Agile, and then that whole term of Agile is a little bit diluted, let's put it like that. But the second thing is what for example, and the Scrum methodology, they call empiricism. So it's that whole thing on not, I mean, for sure we need to think about it, but it's more like, let's do it and let's see what happens when we do it and let's learn out of that. That's what I explained with experimentation. They call it empiricism. So it's that empiric approach on how we learn and how we move forward. And the last big pillar for agility is, and that's where a lot of companies actually struggle. And it's not necessarily the teams are struggling with that, but the companies are struggling with that. And then maybe that's what Lisa said, we need to give people space, is that principle of self-organization. And it's allowing the teams to, and it's acknowledging that everybody's different and acknowledging that the solution which I think is the best is not necessarily the best solution for others. And that's why we should allow a team to self-organize themselves. And it's not only their work principles or where they work or other side elements. In agility, that means that the agile team decides on what are they working on. So there's only input coming from outside, which they should be working on, what they could be working on, what are the priorities from outside. But the team inside is then making the decision, what are we working on today? And that's quite interesting, and that's for a lot of people is scary. So then coming back from a finance, putting that into a finance aspect, is like we talked about customer value, we talked about experimentation, empiricism. But what does it now mean for for a finance team to be self-organized. And I think that's then the big question mark on how much do you want to go out there into the typhoon, as David experienced it, and see how can it shape us to become better. And I think that's the reason why we want to have self-organized teams, because that makes these teams more agile, but that means they makes these teams more nimble, more like they can react a lot faster to the environment around themselves, because one voice might tell them you need to focus on that, but as a finance team, as we said in the beginning of the presentation, the finance team has that beauty of being that independent facilitator which is connected to all parts of the business. And in that sense, you are actually having an overview and hopefully make in that moment the smartest decision to choose what to focus on right now. That might be different the next week, but then you have maybe new information. And that's a little bit what is meant with that self-organizing team. And then the question as a CFO, what do you think about what is required from you as a CFO to allow your team to be self-organized?
That actually sounds quite promising for a very nice working environment for every finance and accounting department. So there shouldn't be any reason to be scared, though I appreciate a finance department not walking out into a level 8 typhoon, because we actually need those people. But if the future is so exciting and interesting for a finance department, where is then the resistance coming from? And maybe that's a question for David, who decided to stay home and not run out into the typhoon, smart as he is. So where do you think is that resistance to change in finance coming from? And then maybe something to add to it, because I very often associate change in finance accounting with technology, because that is a very strong driver of change. It could play a part in it, it could not play a part. Maybe is it related also to training? What are your thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, I'll reference a template in the last place I worked, really, where every person in the organization was supposed to have a career plan. And also all managers were supposed to develop succession plans. So in order to do this, and I'm not saying in reality this actually happened with every single employee, but you have to really be able to assess the skills and the desires, if you like, of in a career sense of every person in your structure. So in one of these situations where you've got perhaps a rather legacy situation where you are now, and a big transformation project coming to get you to somewhere over here. And you know full well, actually, that not everybody is going to be able to be taken on that journey. Partly because some people, everybody's different. Some people are in the job that they should always be in. They shouldn't perhaps be in a job in the new world. And that's one of the painful realities of this process. You're not going to be embarking on a transformational systems project to make the business more efficient if you're going to take every single person on that journey and keep them in the same roles and processes as they had before. So it's a difficult process, and part of that process to assess the skills and identify what's needed in the after state identifies learning and training requirements as well. So sometimes I can think of one case of a financial controller who was working for me who absolutely hated the forecast process, because one of her KPIs was to go out and sit down with business managers and understand their business better, and she just was really uncomfortable doing that. And she was a classic statutory finance sort of accountant, wanted to sit there and do the month end and knock up the statutory accounts and what was going to be reporting back for London, but that was where her life sort of stopped. So it's difficult. You've got to be capable of saying, right, this bunch of people, they fit into this new world and they might need some training and development. These bunch of people, some people might welcome early retirement. Some people might welcome, moving to a different department, those kind of things. And there's great case studies on the fact that making your finance department slimmer and more nimble doesn't necessarily mean that those people that are left behind are leaving. They could be completely repurposed to be business analysts and actually add value in a completely different way to the organization. So it works on several levels, and it's hard because people don't actually always know what they want themselves in their future careers. They know perhaps whether they're comfortable where they are now, and whether they go home at night and kick the cat, or kiss the kids before they go to bed and all that kind of thing. But they may not want to be put through this ringer of disruptive change.
Yeah, I think it's really good that you bring in that human element. We talk about business intelligence, automation, finance processes, and it often neglects that there are different types of people in a company, and that in the end, to be fair, that's what you need. You don't want to have a streamlined set of people where everybody thinks the same, does the same things. Otherwise, it wouldn't lead you anywhere. So that's something very important to take into consideration. Lisa?
I was going to say, and further to David, if it's okay if I add another piece as I'm reflecting, David, on what you're saying. I think the other element that we need to consider, or what I've seen that has stopped change, is your culture. So what I mean by that is, so I think it's really imperative for leadership teams to really reflect on their culture and really be honest around whether actually all their symbols, practices, their general vernacular and the ways of working are going to be in line with what they're saying we want the company to be. Some examples can be that listen, we want you to innovate, we want to test and learn, we want to do that quickly and learn fast. But actually, if that's what you're saying, but actually your culture and the way you work is in complete opposition to that, your change will stop. So I think that would be a great lens also for people to focus on. And that really starts from the top. It starts with leadership teams to really assess, what is our culture really like? What are our symbols and processes? Are they actually going to help us or not? And that your culture will be the one thing that will stop you or your progress or how quickly you change.
Perfect.
If I could just put in one more point at the back of that, the auditors are a great resistor of change,
Yes.
I find. And I've never come across an auditor, some of you may have, never come across an auditor who's voted less paper with fewer signatures on them, I once had to respond to an auditor who'd managed to find a journal voucher that I hadn't signed. And I said, well, here's the thing. The more pieces of paper you put on my desk, the less time I've got to look at each one. So, you have to break a few eggs, as they say, to make an omelette. And sometimes these people...
Yeah, I mean, mentioning auditors, and I think that referring back to David Marquette's book on Turn the Ship Around, he has a new approach to audit, and I think it's also quite interesting, and it goes back to what Lisa said about culture, is it also depends on how you look at auditing, and he basically said, look, why don't these auditors are going, I mean, in his case, from submarine to submarine to submarine, and in other cases, from department to department to country, and they are experiencing a lot of different elements on how things are done. Let's use these auditors and let's use their wealth of knowledge and learn from them. And it was this mindset shift, which then totally, where the people said, look, we have a problem with that, auditor, help me, because you should know. And that actually put the auditors in a different position where they actually said, oh, and actually they appreciated it. And I talked to other auditors as well. I mean, yes, it's actually true that a lot of people are just simply afraid when they hear the word audit and talk and the auditors coming. And it's just that tradition that auditors need to be that devil's advocate and need to create that fear. And then when it comes back to innovation and creativity, fear is a killer of creativity. And it's a natural thing. It's something which neuroscientists are talking about. And in this perspective, when coming back to what are the bottlenecks of change, it's exactly that culture. What is that culture? What is that space we're creating? And when we want that the finance team is supporting the business, what are the cultural barriers which we have created as influencers, which are holding us back as influencers, but holding the teams back as well to be creative and to come up with new things and looking at the different side of how we can become that independent facilitator, objective facilitator.
Great. That I think that we already have some very nice takeaways on what we can do right away. As we did in the last sessions, we always try to find what can I do right after the session. From Lisa, we got something on culture. How can I work on my culture? What can I do right away to make sure my culture is more appreciative of change? David, look at your people. Look who is the right person to actually go into more of an automation view of things. And then Tim, how to handle your auditors and actually get the most out of the auditors, and probably even then improve your relationship with them in the same time. So it's time to wrap up. Since this is the last of the business intelligence management series, I'll give the word back to David for a last few words.
Thank you very much, Michael. Well moderated as always. Just a few things to say very briefly. I'm so grateful to all of you who've attended these sessions. This was the first workshop series we put together, and it seemed like this was a nice broad subject for us really to get stuck into. For those of you that haven't attended all of them and would like to hear more, all the videos of these sessions are available on the CFO Connect's website. You should be able to find them. Some of the 1 hour sessions have been chopped up into smaller pieces to make it more digestible for those of most millennials on the call. And we'll need to sort of brainstorm and find out some new topics. We have a couple in our mind. We think there's something we can do on getting ready for fundraising. We think there's something we might be able to do on when the CFO has to lead strategy. So that's there's a couple of points in there. If you don't have a strategy specialist in your organization, how do you manage to do that as a CFO? So I will be sending feedback forms or some sort of form, like forms, do we? But anyway, a free format thing where you can fill in some ideas and send it all back. We will be writing up a bit of a debrief on these sessions so that perhaps there's a bit of a white paper covering the five sessions with the learnings that have come out of them. We hope to be able to send you a digital continued professional education certificate in case you need that for your institute. And of course, we're trying to put together social events, and I have a meeting next Monday with someone who wants to pay for a social event in Hong Kong. So there might be some good news and some fun coming your way. The thing I would ask of you all most is we probably have about 70 or 80 people over this series that have registered and who may or may not know it, but are now members of CFO Connect as a result. In order for this to be successful, we need people to engage a little bit with each other and reading content on the portal. We try and find good news stories and insightful pieces and put it up there. It's all free to read. If you're a member, that's not a problem. And obviously, we're going to be doing more events. So do please stay in touch. And from time to time, if you can go to the portal and read some stuff and let us know what you think, that would really help us on our journey. So we will be in touch. We'll see you soon. Have a great Typhoon Wednesday.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, David.
Bye-bye.
Everybody. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye all.